Every once in a while, I run across an app that makes me go, huh, that's cool. A few weeks ago, that was an app called Lazydocker. This app lets you manage your Docker instance with a nice minimalistic UI from directly inside the console. It even has mouse support. Now, why would anybody need a minimalistic Docker UI? Everyone knows that all Docker users fall into one of two categories. Single IQ plebs who can only deploy a container with a full interactive web UI, or GigaChad power users who do everything in the CLI without a monitor. In all seriousness, there are plenty of times where I'm working on my Docker instance and I don't want the granularity of a full UI, but I can't be bothered to remember every single Docker command and navigate through the CLI. This is where Lazydocker comes into play. It's the best of both worlds. Lazydocker runs on your Docker host or even within Docker itself. I deployed it on my Linux machines using the provided script. From there, just navigate to the install path. By default, it's in the .local/bin folder of your home directory, and then run Lazydocker. You're greeted with a pretty bare bones screen that's not too spooky enough to scare off the UI plebs, but it's also not pretty enough to make power users angry. The first section you'll see at the top left is a list of your containers. You can navigate through them with the arrow keys, and you'll notice the window on the right side contains some useful information. This window can be used to present various pieces of information about the container you have highlighted, from logs, stats, environment variable set, container configs, and even a top table of the processes inside the container. Intuition says you'd use the arrow keys to cycle through these, but you actually use the bracket keys.
Oh my god, Brett, you said you didn't want to remember any Docker commands, but here you are remembering Lazydocker commands? Checkmate.
Nah, look at the bottom of the screen and it gives you the hotkeys you need to navigate and open menus. Pressing B opens up a bulk edit tool depending on which section you're in, and X opens up a list of hotkeys for how to interact with the highlighted object or just the UI in general. This works pretty well, but some things just don't seem to work for some reason. Like if I try to press W to open up a web browser, nothing happens. And pressing M to view the logs just kicks me out. Everything else seems to work fine though. Like if I want to restart a container, I just navigate to it and press R. Maybe I want to exec into it. Shift E and boom. As someone who typically uses Portainer to interact with my containers, this is so much faster. I kind of skimmed over the window on the right side, so let's take a look at that. I typically hang out in the Logs tab, but the Stats tab is my runner-up when I'm monitoring container usage while running specific tasks. Then the Environment tab is pretty useful too for when I want to quickly double-check what variables I pass to a container or want to quickly compare the variables between two containers. I can quickly just toggle between the containers rather than worrying about navigating a web UI or being some kind of CLI savant. Config has a crap ton of data about the container, but I typically only use it to check the specific image the container is running. Then there's the top tab that honestly I don't even use, and I've never run into a reason for using it, but that doesn't mean it's not useful for you. And Lazydocker isn't just limited to viewing your containers. Using the left and right arrow keys, you can navigate through the different windows on the left from containers, images, volumes, networks, and the Lazydocker config itself. None of them are as feature-rich as the container section, obviously, but they're still quite useful. While we're in the volume section, our window on the right shifts to a static config window. That's pretty much the norm outside of the container section. Again, we can use the up and down arrow keys to walk through our images and see a bunch of info about them on the right. Pressing B here opens up our bulk edit tools and gives us a single option to prune all images. Pressing X gives us specific commands which include remove image and run predefined command. More on that in a bit. I don't really do too much in this section, as the most common piece of info I need is the image size, and that's already displayed without having to navigate into the container. The volume section is pretty similar in that it's simple in terms of interactions, but I do navigate down here a good bit specifically to see the amount of a specific volume. The network section is my least visited section since my Docker networking setup is more basic than my pumpkin spice latte order. Every container essentially just uses a network bridge and gets an IP from the host. The end. Not much going on. Then at the very top, we have our Lazydocker config. This just displays all of our config for the actual app. You're free to scroll through here and take a peek at some of the options. The one that caught my eye was the custom commands. Pressing X shows us that we can use the E hotkey to edit the config. However, when I try that, I'm just shown a blank file. When I press O to view the file, I get an error. I'm not sure what's going on here. Maybe it's something to do with the script installation. So you can see, while this is a cool little tool, it's not quite as polished as I'd like. Sure, it's open source and I could contribute, but with the amount of development projects I have going on in real life, I don't wanna. So classy golf claps all around for Jesse Duffield and all of the contributors. Overall thoughts: Lazydocker is awesome and definitely going to be a normal app in my rotation moving forward. The amount of data you have access to and how easy and quickly you can access it is just so useful. I'm willing to look past the oddities in exchange for an increase in productivity. Let me know if this is something you're interested in down in the comments, or maybe something similar that you're using. That's all I have for you today. If you enjoyed this one, then drop a like, and if you want to see more content like this, then subscribe. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube members and my Patreons. You guys are my quirky little CLI tool with config files that don't exist. You guys are great, and if you're still watching, you're like a 6 out of 10. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.